Hello and welcome to Board Game Gumbo. Today we're going to be taking a look at Breakout, an expansion to Lockup from Thunderworks Games that's launching on Kickstarter at the end of May. Before we get into the expansion, I thought I'd give a very quick overview of how the base game of Lockup works so that you can see exactly what the expansion is adding. Lockup is a game for 1 to 5 players that plays in 45 to 90 minutes. First thing you're going to do when you start a game of Lockup is you're going to decide what race you're going to be playing as. So there are several fantasy races here that you can choose to play as. On the basic side, each race is exactly the same. And then there is an advanced side that changes the races slightly, so they have sort of a unique play style. Once you've chosen a race, you're going to get 6 workers, essentially, of your color. Most of them have a number in the top right, and that is their strength. You have one that has this fist icon, that's your enforcer, and their strength is equal to the number of red cubes that you have. You typically start the game with 1, so at the very beginning, this worker has a strength of 1, but it can go up throughout the course of the game. And then you have a scout here. What the scout lets you do is avoid suspicion when you are resolving an area, which is important, and we'll talk a little bit about it later on. Lockup plays over 6 rounds, which is what this little king's crown there represents. And each round essentially has 3 phases. The first phase of each round is players putting their pieces out onto the board. There are 8 locations that you can go to, starting here at the exercise yard, and then going to the sewers, and then around the board, finally to the library. This is also the order that the locations are resolved in when we get to phase 2 of the game. Notably, you cannot put workers in the library. That's just where workers go if they don't gain a benefit from another area. So starting with the first player, they can choose to put out any number of their workers that they want to a single area on the board. So say I wanted to add the 2 and the 5 token here to the exercise yard. Once you've added to a location, you can never add more workers to that location. So if it gets back to my turn, I can't then add this person here. I've already placed in the exercise yard, and I can only do that once per round. You do, however, have the ability to place 2 of your workers face down over the course of a round. So I could flip this guy over so that my opponents don't know exactly how much strength I have there. Then the next player would go, placing any number of their workers in any area they choose, like so, and then so on until every worker has been placed or every player has passed. Once all workers have been placed or players have passed, then you're going to go on to the second phase of the game, which is resolving each room. And you're going to start with the exercise yard, which is labeled as the first room. The rules for how rooms resolve are essentially the same, although who exactly gets the benefit changes slightly. And the exercise yard, whoever has the most strength will get one of these power gems and also become the first player. Whereas the second most strength will just get a power gem. At the sewers, if you're first, you get 3 green cubes. Second gets 2 green cubes, but only if you're playing with 4 or more players. And then anybody else who's at that location will get a single green cube. The infirmary, first place will get 3 blue cubes, and then last place will get 1 blue cube. The smithy gives you 2 gray cubes for the most, 1 gray cube for second most. The commissary lets you turn resources into other resources, or if you have the most strength there, you simply get any resource that you want. The chow hall over here allows you to hire these goon cards that are out on the board. Goon cards do a couple of different things, for instance, scoring you extra points at the end of the game, and some of them give you immediate resources when you gain them. Then you go to the cell block. At the cell block, you can either craft items by paying their cost, and these are worth additional points and sometimes have additional effects, or you can reserve items by flipping them over and putting them in front of you. You're the only person who can build that item later in the game. If at any point you do not gain any benefit from a location, or if you choose not to take the benefit of that location, that worker in that location is going to go to the library. And then you'll resolve the library last, where whoever has the most strength there will draw 2 library cards and keep 1. And then second and third will simply draw a card from the top of the deck. That is the very basics of how a round of lockup will play. You'll play through 6 rounds total, and at the end of the game, the player with the most victory points, the most infamous gang in the prison, will be declared the winner and have the opportunity to go fight in the Coliseum for the king, which probably isn't going to end well, but at least you're the most infamous gang in the prison. Now let's take a look at Breakout and what it will add to this game. All right, so let's take a look at what's being added with the Breakout expansion. And do please keep in mind that all of this is prototype material, so components will change, possibly art will change, maybe even rules will change before the game is actually in your hands. And let's go through the easy things first, and that is there are more cards to add to the game. So there's a whole new deck of goons that get added. There are more tome cards for you to add to the deck. There are more of these goal cards, which we didn't talk about in the overview, but essentially these are extra ways to score points. And there's a couple new ones to add to that deck. There are more items. And then again, something else we didn't talk about, but there are more cards for the solo version of the game. Perhaps the most obvious addition is this catacomb board here, which will be added to the bottom of the board. And each player will get one of these lantern pieces that will start at the entrance. We also have some tunnel tokens, which will be put out randomly to 7 spaces on the board. They do not go to the library. Some of these tunnels are open, like this one in the sewers, while some of them are collapsed. Once you put these tokens out randomly, you're going to remove all the collapsed tokens because you can't go through a collapsed tunnel to get to the catacombs. One of the final additions to the expansion is each player gets 1 more worker. This is your Seeker. He has a strength of 1, and also it denotes him as the Seeker, which is how you're going to interact with the catacomb board. There's also a deck of cards here, which is the legend deck we'll talk about in a minute. For the most part, the game plays exactly the same way. On your turn, you're going to select any number of your workers and add them to one of the locations on the board. You can still only play 2 of your workers face down. However, you're only going to place a total of 6 workers. The last worker, whatever's left over, is going to be placed face down onto the active legend card. And you are going to know what the card is. So at the beginning of the round, you'll reveal the legend card and it has some ability on it. So the strongest crew may spend 1 resource to recruit 1 goon from the game board or discard pile. This is going to resolve at the end of the round. And depending on the worker that you put there, is going to decide if you activate it or somebody else does. Also, we now have the tunnel locations. The tunnel locations are where you're going to want to put your Seeker. If only 1 Seeker is at a location, then that player is going to be able to move their lantern token on the game board into the next room. There are arrows on this game board, which you may be able to see. There are, however, branching paths. So once you get to this area right here, once you move from here, you can either go up here or you can go down here. You can make that choice freely at that time. Also, some locations require you to pay something. For instance, if you want to go down this path, you have to discard 1 resource of any type. And there are some dead ends. The tomb down here is a dead end. You cannot ever leave the tomb if you go there. However, there are some treasures. The first player to go to a location that has any treasure tokens on it is going to be able to look at all of the tokens, select whichever one they want, and then put the other 2 back down. Now you do have to resolve these tokens immediately, but it's a nice little bonus that you get, and obviously getting there first gives you the most choice. Notably, there are enough tokens for everybody, so everybody is going to get a little bonus when they go to those rooms. Each room also has a star on it that is victory points that you will score at the end of the game based on where your token ends up. So at the end of the game, if you're here, you'll score 9 additional points. We already talked about the tomb, which is a dead end, but it is worth 15 points at the end of the game. Finally, you also have the opportunity to escape. If you get to the escape spot, it's worth 17 points plus 3 points for every round that's still remaining in the game. So how do you move down this board? That is with your Seeker. So if you are the only person at a location with the seeker, you're going to move 1 spot. There is one other tunnel piece that has a ×2 on it. If you are the only seeker at that location, you move 2 spots. If there are multiple seekers at a location, then you're going to determine who gets that movement based off the rules of the game, which is who has the most strength there. And if you're tied for strength, who is the first player, or the person most closely seated to the first player going clockwise around the table. So that's everything that Breakout is going to be adding to the base game of Lockup. You have the catacombs here, which you're moving through by placing your seekers. You have these tokens here, which will determine in what area you can actually get into the catacombs. So it's going to be making the areas that have those tokens more valuable throughout the course of the game. And of course, you have more cards for every deck in the game, more items, more goons, more tome cards, and those cards, of course, are going to incorporate the new elements of the game. And that's it. That's everything that Breakout will be adding to Lockup. Again, Breakout is launching on Kickstarter at the end of May from Thunderworks Games, and we hope you'll take a look.